Welcome to this video, which is all about how I made the Truly Victorian Elliptical Cage Crinoline. Particularly motivated because I wanted this shape of skirt for my modern fairy tale wedding gown. Floofy cupcake with more volume to the back than the front and able to support layers of petticoats and floaty tulle and lace. It's made with a bag of fabric at the bottom, into which the lower hoops sit. 4 bone channels of different sizes encircle the body, and the upper 4 wires just sit around the back, with ties to hold them in place. As more of the volume is in the rear, there's also a crescent of fabric off the back of the waistband, onto which many of the vertical support ribbons attach. Let's get to it. So the next thing I'm going to make is the elliptical hoop skirt. And to do that, I need to get the mannequin padded to my size so that I can do it. So this is the pattern that I'm intending to use for my wedding corset. And I think it's fitting pretty well. I probably want to wear it a little bit more around the house, just to be sure I'm happy with it. But I think I'm pretty good to go. The main point of today is to do some measurements so that when I'm mocking up Madam, padding up Madam to make the hoop skirt, that it's suitable. And really, I just need the waist for that. Right, I think that's all that I wanted to do today. Let's get Madam sorted. Okay, she's ready. So yes, there could be more padding at the hips. I could pad the bust more, but I don't need to, because I've got the general shape and I've got the waist to the point that I wanted. I also prepared my materials. I had striped cotton shirting fabric for the bottom bag of the hoop skirt, bone casing, herringbone tape for the waistband and the vertical support ribbons, as well as smaller cotton tape for the tie strings, heavy metal hoop wire, which I expect will not be enough, and so I also have lighter metal boning, which I use for corsetry, of which I have plenty. A gold buckle, metal bone caps, and finally I also have plumber's tape for binding the ends. The bag is made up of pieces that are rectangular and close to rectangular, so I started by ripping fabric to the appropriate widths for the pieces I need. I decided to cut out what the pattern has as the front and side pieces of the bag as one, as I didn't see any reason to cut straight lines just to sew them up again. I cut the sides to the shape required. I also cut out the back pieces, which are shaped on both sides. From scraps, I cut out 4 crescent shapes. I laid one back piece onto one side piece and pinned in place. I stitched the seam together and overlocked to secure the raw edge. Then I stitched the seam down to one side to keep it flat. After attaching the other back and front side pieces, I laid the 2 halves over each other and then pinned the back seam, which was sewn in the same way. It was now all one long piece. I folded it in half lengthways and pinned the top edge together. Then I stitched along the top, leaving space at each end so that I can get into the front later to insert the bones. I pressed the seam open, then turned it right side out, and pressed flat. Next, it was time to join it into one big loop, so I pinned the front edge together. I stitched the seam, then top stitched to one side, so it sits nice and smoothly. At this point, it was in a big circle, and I was ready to sew the bone channels. I marked the front 8 inches to remind myself to keep that open for bone insertion. Then it was time for some long lines of stitches, creating the bone channels. I marked the distances I needed to sew from the edge on masking tape on my machine, which worked quite well. And while a little hard to see, at this point the bone casings were all sewn, and I had also marked on where the vertical ribbons need to attach. The bag was all prepared. As per the instructions, I cut my waistband from the herringbone tape with a good tail. The petticoats will sit under the arrow hook, but the hoop skirt waistband will sit at the waist. I threaded the waistband through the buckle at one end, folded under the raw end, and then stitched it to secure. And I overlocked the other end to bind it. We have a waistband on the waist of Madam. With all 4 layers of the crescent together, I stitched around the outer edge. I notched the seam, pressed it open over a ham, and then turned right sides out. After pressing, it was nice and flat, and then I top stitched around to lock it in place, and then added further layers of stitching. After it was all stitched, I overlocked the top edge to secure. Next, I marked the centre back of the waistband with a pin, I pinned on the crescent and stitched it to the waistband. Then I marked my ribbon placement as per the pattern. A quick try on to see how it felt, looking quite cute. And then I put the waistband back on to Madam. I cut each of the required vertical ribbons to length, plus a little extra for flexibility. And I marked all the locations of intersection with the bone channels, as directed in the pattern. I carefully labelled them as I methodically cut each ribbon. I attached the ribbons to the waistband, starting at the centre back and continuing out from there. Then I folded under the ends, pinned them in place, and stitched to secure, following along my previous lines of stitching, all nice and neat. For the front ribbons, I sewed the top into loops around the waistband so they can run freely along. And here we are so far. Starting with my heavy metal boning, which is indeed meant for hoops, I cut the desired lengths for the 4 metal hoops, hoop wires 9 to 12, to insert into the bottom bag. I trimmed the corners and applied the end cap, which is particularly tricky to film, and secured with plumber's tape, the same procedure as I do for metal corset bones. I then had my 4 longest hoop wires prepared, so it was time to insert into the bag. I secured the overlap of the bones with more plumber's tape so that they didn't move around or overlap more than I wanted and collapse in the bag. I kept on inserting the bones and securing with tape until all 4 bones were contained. At which point I could very awkwardly stitch the top of the bag closed. I attached the ribbons to the bag by pinning at the designated points. So far, all the weight is in the back. We shall see how it progresses. Next, it was time to cut bone casings, and I varied from the pattern just slightly, as instead of planning to overlap the hoop wire within the casing, I decided to overlap the casings and sew that into place. I marked the ribbon locations onto the casings as per the pattern. So here are the casings for hoop wires 5 to 8. I cut the bones to length. I had enough heavy metal boning for hoops 7 and 8, but I needed to use some of my lighter corset boning for hoops 5 and 6. I bound the ends, stitched one end of each casing to block it off. Then I inserted the bones and used quilting clips to overlap and keep them circular. Then I stitched them securely, although a little awkwardly, by machine. I added in the last couple of ribbons, pinning in place, and then clipped on hoops 8, 7, 6, and hoop 5, as per the placements that the pattern suggests. After letting the hoop skirt sit for a couple of days, and then taking another look at hoops 5 and 6, they just don't have the structural integrity that they need. They're not holding themselves out. So I don't think the corsetry boning is going to work. I tried to order some more heavy boning online, but it was out of stock. So my plan is to raid cheap old petticoats for hoops. I tried on a few options. And while this one has a pretty shape, it does drag along the ground, and so it's dirty and it has some damage, and so it was a good candidate for hoop donation. I removed the wobbly hoops 5 and 6. I harvested the hoop wires from the dirty and damaged petticoat. There was a little bit of breakage, so that got all wrapped up in plumber's tape. I replaced the hoop wire in hoops 5 and 6, and at this point I was back to where I thought I had been 9 days earlier, with each hoop round and supportive. Here we have hoops 1 to 4. 3 is the last of my original heavy boning, while the others are salvaged from petticoat hoop wire and patched up as needed. I cut casings and inserted the hoop wires. I also cut tie strings. Then I stitched a tie string to each end of the hoop wire casings, as these hoop wires do not go all the way round the body but end at the side front ribbon. I clipped hoop 4 into place, then hoop 3, hoop 2 and hoop 1, and pinning on the short side ribbons which start at hoop 1 rather than the crescent. Then I crawled under and tied all the ties to help develop the shape. At which point it looked like this. It was tipping to the front, not sitting level, and overall was not as smooth as I would like. I shortened the front ribbons, and that had some improvement straight away. I proceeded to do various small adjustments, trying to get the hoops level and the ribbons smooth. Then I carefully tried it on. So here we are. I've got it on, and I think it's sitting on me pretty much as it was on Madam, so that's a good sign, and I'm ready to sew it. Overall, I'm happy that the hoops are all sitting fairly horizontally and that the ribbons are all flowing fairly well from top to bottom, not too wobbly wobbly jerky worky. I know some people like to make a little bum pad to go under the crescent. So you can see the crescent on me, as it was on Madam, is attached at the waistband and then sticks out. It's not like that sitting flat against the body. I don't think it's meant to. And some people put an extra padded bum pad under there to provide support for that. And I think I might look at that down the track. But for the moment, I'm just going to start with it as is and see how much volume the petticoats add, because I don't want to add too much volume. So I think I'll take it step by step. It was then time to hand sew each of the intersections of the hoop casings and vertical ribbons. To secure each point, I sew a few crosses to hold the ribbons and casings in place. This was a highly repetitive process, but with something on in the background, it went smoothly. At the end of a long day of hand-stitching intersections, there was just hoop 1 and the side front ribbons left to do. The process of sewing at a side front intersection is a little different, as that's where the casings end, so you also have to be mindful of the ties. I stitched crosses along the hoop wire, using pliers as needed. I fold in the raw edge and add a final cross. To illustrate the changes I made, I put clips on where the pattern markings said to attach, noting that they do say to adjust before sewing, just as we have done. I added further pins to each ribbon on the bag to hold them straight while sewing. Stitching the ribbons to the bag was an awkward thing to do at this stage, but not locking in the exact placement until this point was something that was definitely worthwhile. And with that, the hoop skirt was complete. I am very happy with this Truly Victorian TV103 1865 Elliptical Cage Crinoline. It's comfortable to wear and easy to move in. It makes the perfect shape to support my petticoats, both when worn as 1860s undergarments, and it was just the shape that I wanted for my wedding day.